Hey guys, this is Mikro. I wanted to talk about Update 3.03, which is one of the biggest PvP changes to the game, and there's a little bit of PvP or PvE stuff in here as well. I'm going to show the PvE thing here before I jump into PvP, so for those people who care about PvE, they can kind of get through this a little bit faster, but the main PvE change here is that Blunderbuss is getting a base damage increase, and it's Savage Divide weak, right? Savage Divide has thrust damage as a weak damage spot, so Blunderbuss is going to be doing even more damage because it does thrust, and inherently Blunderbuss is probably going to be the number one build for this week, or maybe at the lowest end, like a number 2 to 3. So it's like a very, very good weapon for consistent damage for this week in particular for mutations. And with that being said, let's get into everything else related to this patch notes. So it's the Turkey event. We got this funny looking Warhammer that you can get. You can get your luck food, all the good old stuff from the Turkey event. I imagine there's going to be a few new things that we don't know about yet, a few new skins, but that is what's going to be coming. There's a few bug fixes here that I don't think are super noteworthy, and we jump like right into the combat changes right away with this patch notes. Now, Scorpion Sting, this is getting a 50% cooldown increase upon use. So it's not going to be as spammy as it once was, but it's still going to be very, very powerful. I don't see this affecting the artifact a ton because Spear has active cooldown reduction built into the kit, and active cooldown reduction inherently counters this 50% cooldown increase by just increasing by the maximum amount. So if you reduce the maximum amount by 20%, you're still going to be getting this like relatively fast, even though the cooldown got increased by 50%. You're still going to be getting it a little bit slower, but it's going to be a little bit spammy. It's still going to be very good. Lost Stopwatch. This is no longer a cheese build. It goes from a 100% increase to a 1 second increase. So you no longer have the stupid whelps clips where you stun someone, runs around them in circles for 20 minutes, and then one-shots them. Probably a good thing. They also increase the base damage reduction takeoff, so this is reducing the damage when you use the stopwatch by 5 to 10%. So this is going from a pseudo PvP artifact to just purely a tank PvE artifact. Other than that, I would not recommend using the Lost Stopwatch, and even in there, Ankh is probably better to be honest, but Lost Stopwatch isn't terrible. Now, Odo, knockdown effects are going to be taking 20% more damage from that passive now. That only applies to your main hand, does not apply to your offhand. Still a very good effect to go for, but inherently Flail doesn't have a ton of damage. So I don't think this is going to be affecting Flail a ton. And the other thing too with Odo is you always have to tend to give up a dot gem for running Odo, or you have to give up Smite. And if you give up a dot gem, you're going to be losing a 12% damage, and you're going to be gaining 20% damage, but it's relatively inconsistent, and you're losing consistent damage. So I don't tend to think Odo is really worth it unless you want the refreshing move and the heal from lifesteal. Now, in terms of diseases, this is a really, really big change. I would argue this is like the biggest change in a very, very long time, probably since artifacts were introduced, which I guess is not that long ago, but feels like a long time to me at this point, or since I would say heart runes. Like it is very, very big because now instead of going for players, you can inherently go for healers, and the healers are going to be getting 1.5 times the value of disease-based effects applied to them because they're going to get the base disease applied to them, and then they're going to get the outgoing disease effect applied to them. So it's going to reduce their overall healing output significantly, and this basically makes it so it's actually not best to try to disease a player and not lock them down and get them kill, but maybe it's better to go for the healers first. So healers are already in PTSD territory from the SNS flails, and now it's just going to get worse for them, and people are going to be targeting them more, which is going to be very fun for me and not fun for anyone that plays healer. And if you play healer, I am sorry, but it was a bit too good, I would still think, in 3v3 and OPR from a pure healing perspective. Or if you have a posse of healers, it's kind of impossible to win from the other side because not a lot of people run disease-based effects. And this is going to encourage those disease-based builds even more in OPR and in 3v3. Now, Plague Crits. This is probably the best disease-based effect that is being introduced here into New World. I would argue that this is like a fundamentally different perk when it's no longer triggering off that 50% threshold. Now, the thing that this does is it allows you to just kind of spam things. Plague Crit still has, keep in mind, 0.5 second active cooldown, so you can't get it to apply all the time, but you're going to apply a lot of passive disease with this. And the main thing that sticks out for me in terms of what's really good with this is Ice Pylon. Now, Ice Pylon will apply the disease on your offhand if both weapons have plague crits. So if you have an IG, you have a VG, and both of these weapons have plague crits, you will be able to apply the plague crits from your Ice Pylon while your VG is out. If you do not have this plague crits, you will only be able to apply it when the IG is out, if that makes any sense. So it's not perfect by any means, but it's still a very good solution. And I think a lot of people are going to be running this on IG, a lot of people are going to be running it on VG, but especially because both of these weapons have magnetic gloves, or this build in particular has magnetic gloves, which increases that crit chance by 50% and will allow you to get those plagues off more. And IGVG just basically became the default facto. I want to apply as much plague as possible to everyone around me build. Very, very interesting. I think that takes that build from being like S tier to like SS tier. Like it's going to be the game breaking build of next patch. I don't also see it getting nerfed right away because not a lot of people play IGVG in OPR or in 3v3. It's not a popular build, and because it's not popular in either of these modes, it's very unlikely for it to get nerfed because AGS tends to not balance off of war, but they tend to balance off OPR in 3v3 instead. So that will be very, very interesting to see where that lands. The Plague crits here, or Plague strikes and Plague crits, they could be refreshed on the same target now, so you can kind of spam that disease-based effect. Just very helpful for the perk, just getting more value overall. And now let's move on to some other juicers. We got Shirking Heals. This goes from a 5 second to 10 seconds. So to give the summary of Shirking Heals, we have Launch. This is 3.5% heals every 5 seconds per perk. Then it goes to 1.5%. And now we get 1.5%, but happening half as much. So we're roughly at a 75% nerf since the launch. This initial thing here was supposed to be a bug fix. But this bug fix from our perspective is a huge nerf. From the dev perspective, it might be a bug fix, but it's this massive nerf, and some people are still adjusting to that. We still didn't like have a good understanding if Shirking Heals is good or not, and they've just said, you know, we still see some people using Shirking Heals. We're gonna hit it again. We're gonna nerf it into the ground, and I don't think it's gonna be used much anymore. I think it will still be used for solo builds. So if you're solo without a healer, this is still extra heal. Like it's still good. But if you have a healer at all, or you're remotely near a Sacred, I would probably recommend using the Sacred over relying on the Shirking Heals. That being said, when I was using this build, I didn't find it to be super consistent to proc this all the time, so it's a little bit less spammy, and I think it will be a little bit less cheesy, so you won't be able to like 1vx with it, but it will still be useful from a solo perspective to keep yourself up, so it will be interesting to kind of watch that change. Now there's a trick here that is going to be basically reducing the effect of all dot gems on old fortify builds, or all the durations of bleeds on old fortify builds. All the damage from those bleeds is going to be reduced, which I think is very good, and will overall make those kind of bow, musket, bleed oriented builds that are a little bit cheesy in OPR and 3v3 right now, a little bit less potent, which is going to be a good thing. This also buffs conditioning perks, which will be interesting to keep an eye out for. But conditioning perks, like the name implies, are very conditional. If the meta switches, that gear can no longer be useful, so I'd be very careful with going for those super conditioning heavy builds, because it's very expensive to change conditioning, but it's very easy to change a gem slot, if that makes sense. Exhaustive net shot, we go from 8 seconds to 4 seconds on here. Very, very big BB nerf, but still likely a very good perk. Exhaustive net shot still puts you at exhaust cap alone, which is just absolutely incredible, and this is one of the reasons why a fire staff with BB was like one of the best builds in OPR as of last patch, and I think it will still be one of the best builds in OPR with this patch. That being said, we got some BB nerfs. So in PvE, we have that base damage increase. In PvP, we have a base damage reduction. Says to keep the PvP damage the same. So what this actually means is they have a modifier for PvP. They have a global mod, and by increasing the global mod, they need to decrease the PvP mod in order for the damage to be kept in line. So you can see like the little bit of the difference between the PvP and the PvE side there in terms of how the calculation actually works out, which is a little bit interesting. Now, the last chance passive on BB gets reduced from 50 to 30% fortify. Keep in mind this was already new fortify, so I don't think this is going to be a super insane passive. It's still okay, very misleading there. It's still a very good passive, but effectively in light, this is worth about 2/5 of its value. So you have 2/5 of 30%. You're looking at not a very large amount of effective HP boosts, but it's still going to be useful to some degree. This is just kind of a ballpark thing that I've kind of determined based off doing these calculations a lot, where light is worth about 2/5, medium is, or sorry, no, light is worth about a third, medium's worth about 2/5, heavy's about worth a half. So no, this is going down to like 10% effective reduction, like in terms of HP. So your effective HP is going to go up by about 10%. And there's calculators for that I built as well that we can verify that with, but it's just not inherently going to be as good for those builds. On a roll, they made it so that each stack has its own unique duration, so it's not going to be refreshing all the time. I don't think on a roll was honestly even used anyway, so that effectively doesn't do anything, but it's funny that they nerfed that. The primary fire, they reduced the damage coefficient from 23% per pellet to 21% per pellet, so also a small nerf on the primaries. ASB, so this is Azoth Shrapnel Blast. They reduce the damage from 50% per pellet to 45% per pellet. So Azoth Shrapnel Blast might not be as good at one-shotting, but likely still will be good. Where does BB stand after this? I think it maybe goes from S to A tier, but likely still is like a really good build for doing burst in those situations that it's needed. The part that concerns me with this is we're already kind of in a heavy PvP meta, and I think this encourages that heavy PvP meta even more so because BB was one of the best ways to shut down those heavy base builds, because it turns out a heavy base build that is in your backline and is very close quarters to you doing damage with melee is right near a shotgun, and shotguns do a lot of damage. Now we have a Lifestaff changes. Splash of Light, reduce the radius from 100 meter to 25 meter. And all the healers just got PTSD instantly because now they have to play close to all the monkeys that are making them go insane right now. Because SNS Flail, this build still has inherently 7 staggers built into the kit. Now every life staff has to play near it in order to heal their team. So no one is going to be happy from this change, to be honest, except for the people that play SNS Flail, which I happen to be one of those people that plays it on like an off server, and it's very fun to play. And I am inherently sorry to every single life staff player, because now you're actually going to have to get in the thick of things. You might not be able to play light all the time anymore. You might have to go up to either a medium class or get very creative with how your positioning is taken into account, because if you get hit by an SNS Flail, you are basically done for, and there's no way around that unless you have your ultimate. So you need to be getting that ultimate up as fast as possible, or you're likely just going to be dead to a stagger-based lockdown build, which is very, very popular and potent right now within PvP. That being said, Flail did receive some nerfs, and we're going to be talking about those in a second. Now, Voidblade. Remove the duration limit of Voidblade, now remains active until weapon becomes inactive. Voidblade is finally here. Well, we finally have found it. This is going to be the best build in the game. Yeah, no. Voidblade will always inherently suck because it just does less damage than a Great Axe. It also does less damage than the Abyss. It does less damage than basically everything. It's very clumsy. It's very hard to hit. Uh, it's just not a good fundamental skill, and the tracking needs to be fundamentally reworked for this to even be possible to be played within PvP. That being said, PvE, it is a decent buff because healers do run Voidblade in there because it is optimal from a DPS to healing perspective, because Voidblade is good for healing and good for DPS for that mode in particular. Now, they fixed an issue that caused several staggering attacks and not trigger the increment for the breakout dodge. This is a PvP mechanic where if you get hit by a stagger, like if you get hit by a stagger into a stagger, you can get a free dodge roll out of this. You have to not be spamming dodge, so you can't spam dodge here, but you could use dodge after you get hit by the second, and then you get a free light roll. Even if you're in heavy, even if you're in medium, you get a free light roll, and you can chain that sometimes and do like double light rolls. So this is like a good way to escape a clump, and now all those full passives will probably be proccing that, which is very interesting. Fix an issue with attacks that didn't stagger, but unintentionally incremented the breakout dodge. So that's going to be working the other way. So you're not going to get those breakout dodges as much from other random attacks, but you're going to be getting them from Flail now. Probably a good thing. That should have been there in the first spot, and that's a small nerf to SNS Flow, but I honestly think that build is still insane because I don't think people are inherently good with the breakout roll based mechanic. The only change from here is you can't go like smite into trip. Like that does not work anymore because it should trigger a breakout roll. But you could still go like smite into scream into trip or something like that. Like there's still other ways to get around this that I inherently think that that's not going to be that big of an issue. As long as someone is rooted, even if they get the light roll, they're not going to move anywhere. So it's basically just saying, hey, maybe don't go for 7 staggers. with your build. Maybe go for like 6 daggers and a root. 6 stags plus root. Like that's going to be the main change. You want to root with your staggers so that if someone gets staggered to get the light roll, they don't go anywhere. And I don't think that's going to be changing that too much. Economy and progression basically just says F you because you're not going to have any gold to upgrade any mats. Uh, but aside from that, uh, we have some stuff that's coming at least. The PvP issue, they're making it so that the PvP related perks are no longer obtainable, so you're not going to be able to get that refreshing ward, health, shirking heals set anymore for those heavy players, which kind of sucks. But instead, this refreshing ward perk is getting replaced with an RNG perk that can be upgraded later. So that heavy set is going to be health and shirking heals. That medium set is going to be health and I believe shirking heals. And that light set is going to be health and refreshing. And that last perk is RNG and can be upgraded to whatever you want. The nice part about these is all these sets have con in them. They don't have magnify, which is fantastic because magnify is still one of the worst decisions that AGS has made, and I am really hoping that they don't switch that to be magnified right when this patch comes out, because on the PTR it was con still, and that was fantastic because you could actually do creative builds and you weren't forced to not be able to run a build because you ran 2 artifacts and you're over 50% or over 50 magnify and you couldn't go like 300 con, 250 int, 50 focus, which is a very good Voidblade spec if it was actually good, but alas, Voidblade is still not good. So with that being said, let me know what you guys think of these changes. I think they're kind of incredible. The one I'm really excited for in particular is this disease-based change, but I am very upset that they did not address the gold problem inherent in the game right now, where no one has any gold because it's all going to AGS because they decided that you want to use your, if you use your daily for those chromatic seals to upgrade your gear, it's going to cost 5k and a bunch of faction mods, and it's just draining everyone's bank accounts in terms of New World, and it's just not great looking forward, and I really hope they change that. But for now, we're going to have to suffer through it, and we have some new bits to acquire, so get ready to be even more broke than you already are. If you're like me and you have 1k gold left on a few characters, then maybe you just don't upgrade your gear for a bit. But with that being said, I'll see you guys later.